If Israel exists, it commits a genocide. Israel can disarm, it commits a genocide. Israel can stop killing everyone, anyone, it commits a genocide. It doesn't matter. As long as Israel exists for these people, Israel commits a genocide. Anyways, so I am in love with Elica Le Bon. Well, I'm not in love, but I don't know what is love. Anyways, I don't even know what that is. I've never experienced it. I don't think I ever will. But Elica Le Bon, I love her name though. Like it rolls off the tongue. Probably one of my favorite people here. Haven't heard anything from Dave Smith ever since she was in the on the Piers Morgan show. So maybe she was the one. I don't know. But yeah, so I don't want to watch the whole clip. I do want to watch the brutality of Iran's regime and the rise of real anti-Semitism, and maybe a bit of scapegoating the Jews because it does bring into perspective World War II and today and like kind of like how it goes. I think it's a bit extreme. However, just because like it's a bit extreme because just because there are similarities doesn't mean it's actually going there. I think we grew too much to actually cause it. I know some people would still love to create World War II type scenario for the Jews. I'm just saying that the governments are probably not going to let it. When pro-Palestine comes, ask them one question: what is your peace solution? Either is Israel stop attacking or Israel should stop genocide. That is why they have nothing to say. Well, actually, no. Their peace solution is Israel needs to just leave. That is their peace solution. If you ask a pro-Palestinian, what should Israel do to stop this war? Israel should cease to exist. And all of the Jews should be displaced. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That's what they think. Anyways, let's get on with this one. Let's go.
Have a democratic government in its place.
And that's exactly what I've seen from
Okay, she does talk a bit fast, so I'll just put it at 1.5.
people and that speak on behalf of Iran because they can't talk. They are state-run media. You better not dissent from the government. So I have seen and heard almost through the grapevine or vicariously through other people that understand what's going on in Iran is saying that they are actually hopeful that things go south with the government so that they can have or elect the people that they want to be liberated. You know, the crazy thing to me is that all the people in our country in America that are crying liberation,
Stay hydrated.
they don't want the people of Iran to be liberated. They don't want the women of Iran. I watched a video the other day of a woman, and I can't verify this because I never lived in Iran, but she was saying that if she were to catch her husband in the act, violating their marriage vows, if you know what I'm saying, and she were to kill her husband, she would be killed, put to death. Yep. If he caught her cheating and he killed her, nothing would happen. Yep. And she also went through and said that women, if they violate certain crimes, and it's pretty much anybody, but women specifically, if they violate certain crimes and they're guilty and they're sentenced to be hung, that if they're a virgin, they can't hang a virgin, so they have to take advantage of her first, rape her, and then hang her after that. And the barbarism of just...
Damn. I would love to be a man in that society. No, I actually would feel bad about it. I can't stand like people being hurt in front of me. I don't care if they're hurt on TV. I don't care if they're hurt somewhere else that I don't care about. But in front of me, I can't take it. It bothers me to the depths of my soul, whatever that is. But yeah.
Just thinking about that existence should be enough for people in the West to say, no, I hope to God that we stopped them from getting a nuclear weapon, and I hope that we don't have to fight the war, but I hope that they do have a regime change, which is what Trump said. But I want to hear your thoughts on anti-Semitism, because I used to think that anti-Semitism was like racism, right? And in part, it's like that to a certain degree. I mean, people over...
It is. It's just like, dude, like, it's all a stereotype. It really is. It's just a stereotype. Racism is a stereotype. Anti-Semitism is a stereotype. It's all the same, you generalize people based on something.
Use it, right? Everything is racist and nothing is racist. Everything's anti-Semitic. But nowadays, I'm starting to see from a lot of conservatives, from a lot of other people who are pundits on television, who are having or displaying what I believe is true anti-Semitism, which is this blind hate for the Jews. So what's your thoughts on anti-Semitism? Do you think it's legit? Do you think there's some there?
Like, as you know, like from the last two videos, we're talking about Candace Owens here, okay? We're talking about the Hodge twins, Candace Owens, who else is like a normal... Who else was like a normal right wing who is now an anti-Semite? I don't want to say Sneeko. I think Sneeko was retarded to begin with, but he was entertaining at least. Yeah, I think it's like literally like it's mostly Hodge twins and Candace Owens that like the only ones I can think of that are like that were like normal conservatives, like not too extreme.
Yeah, oh god, I think so much. I mean, I honestly, when I started speaking up about this on October 7th, I'm such a sort of nuanced and detail-oriented person. I'm not the person that jumps in to say like, oh, racism, this. And so a lot of Jews kept saying to me, this is all about anti-Semitism. And I was like, I'm sure it's not all about anti-Semitism, But the more I dug and dug and dug, I was turning over every single rock, every single stone. And then by 6, 7 months in, I was like, oh my god, this is really just all anti-Semitism. And when you look at
And again, I don't think she means like the regular person. The regular person would be like, we don't want Palestinian people to die, whatever. So we don't want civilians to die, yada yada yada. That's the regular person. The ones who are pushing the message extremely hard are not pushing that message for the sake of like civility. They're pushing that message usually because they just hate the Jew. Okay? I honestly cannot believe a person who has absolutely nothing to do with a place. If you're like a regular New York citizen, okay, regular dude, and you have no connection to Israel, I cannot see a reason for you to be so intensely into this conflict. Like you are like really into this conflict. Like, oh, they're so evil. And like you go and you protest in the streets, right? And you fucking like practically riot. And you join all of these movements. And you join all of these walks. And like, why? Why? Like if you're a regular person, why?
the patterns throughout history, where we are right now is so scary because it mimics exactly every pattern in history before the worst case scenario. It's the same thing that happened in Nazi Germany. You had this regime that was like, everything is, the fault of the Jews, everything is the fault of the Jews. And then people rallied behind this regime and it ended up being in World War II. And so now you're seeing a very, very similar trend where we have, the social justice warriors and the humanitarians of our time being so anti-Israel that they're now linking arms with terrorists and jihadists and extremists because they're freedom fighters that are resisting the Jews. And so what we're seeing is exactly what's always happened in all of history. You are now allying with the worst humans on earth because you're so anti-Semitic at this point, and you think that that's why they say it's first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people, right? Because what you do is that you bring these jihadists in by saying, they're freedom fighters, resistance, whatever, and then they kill the Jews, and guess what? They're going to kill you next too, because they don't care about Christians either, and they don't care about any other religion. So what my primary fear of anti-Semitism...
Here's another thing, and this probably is a really under the radar type of propaganda that is happening in the West. When you migrate a shit ton of people from Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, whatever, people, like places that like really don't like Israel, okay? And like not necessarily all of them, but like a good chunk of them, right? And they are inside of your society, and their kids go to the same school as your kids, and something happens in Israel, and these kids have a strong opinion. They basically, not even like intentionally, but they essentially brainwash the other kids to believe that Israel is evil. Why? Because, well, this guy is my friend. He tells me one thing, I'm going to believe it. Like, it's just normal, right? It's like, my friend tells me one thing, I'm going to believe it. Why would he lie to me about this, right? So, like, they get propagated very early on. Now, and as well, like, you are somebody who knows nothing about the Middle East. Your neighbor is a Middle Eastern. You ask them, it's like, oh, what do you think about this conflict, whatever? And they're like, all out, just like fucking propaganda against the Jew, right? Because again, there's way more of them. It's way easier for them to propagate, even if they don't mean to. Just like they are, even if they're just sharing their worldview, you are being propagated. Why? Because you only hear their view. Why? Because, believe it or not, you're gonna meet a lot less Jews than Muslims. Okay, there's a lot less of them.
Is, yes, number one, it is a death cult that seeks to kill Jews, but it's also a death cult that kills us all next. And this is exactly what wokeness has turned into, which is why I call it inclusive terrorism.
Right. I'm glad you said that. You make so much sense. I almost feel like you put this stuff together so well and more eloquently than I can. You are 1,000%. I used to think that anti-Semitism was just blown out of proportion. I'm like, yeah, everything's anti-Semitic. It's not about people. People cannot like Jews, and there's nothing wrong. People don't like groups, and they have their reasons. But then I started I think it's almost like I say people get bit by the anti-Semite bug. That's what I say, because it seems like it goes down a path, right? It starts with questioning one thing, which is reasonable, right? I mean, it's reasonable to question Benjamin Netanyahu. It's reasonable to question how much money we give Israel and making sure that we're being stewards over the money that our taxpayers are paying. It's reasonable, but it doesn't stop there. It goes from that to now the Jews run the world. Now the Jews killed JFK. Now the Jews faked the moon landing. You know what I'm saying? It's like before you know it, I heard somebody say the other day,
the Jews created dinosaurs to make Christians not believe in God. Space is fake and gay. Brought to you by a non-Jew hater, Candace Owens. Oh, sorry. Jews created space, and space is fake and gay.
that the Jews were responsible for slave trade in Western Africa, like the actual slave trade that brought slaves to America. The Jews ran the slave trade. I'm just like, and then it goes down, and then it becomes this lie, because I researched and I wrote an op-ed about it. People were saying the Ashkenazi Jews have no association to the line of Abraham.
Tsarist theory.
The Tsarist theory, which was a hypothesis and not even really a fact-based research. And there has been genetic research and studies that have been done in 2010 and 12, and there was a couple of peer-reviewed articles that I put in my op-ed that shows very clearly that they do have a lineage back to Abraham, and that it's a little watered down because of the marrying outside of the race and conversions and stuff that came from that region. But they do have a line. So to say that they don't is the beginning of saying that they're illegitimizing Israel.
Exactly. You're so exactly right. And do you know what I was thinking this today? I was thinking about, I mean, this is going to sound really, just to take this how you want it. IQ is a bell curve, okay? It is a bell curve. And statistically, most people are not highly intelligent people. And highly intelligent people look behind the curtain. They look below the surface and they start digging and they start realizing these things. But the problem is most people don't do that. And so most people are so easy to brainwash because they just take something that's right in front of them and they believe it. And it's really interesting because this book that I'm talking about, it actually outlines all of this and exactly what you're saying as well, because the
and in my opinion, that is actually a good thing. It's a bad thing when used negatively, but it's a good thing when used positively, because you want majority of people to be sheep. You don't want everybody to be a fucking leader. You don't want to prove your point to every single person you meet. Okay? It's a good thing for society overall, in general, when it's, especially if it's used properly, that most people do not question. Most people are just gonna go with it. It's a lot easier for society to move on when shit like this happens, right? Problem is, you get the Candace Owens who are just using this in a negative way.
Throughout history, whether it's the Marxists, the Soviet Union, Stalin, Lenin, Mao, or Hitler, whoever it is, right? Even Khomeini in Iran, the pattern is that they front as these sort of humanitarians,
which, by the way,
who care about oppression.
Speaking of, right? She mentioned Hitler, right? You think every Nazi in Germany was an evil person? No, they were just going with the flow. They're just doing what they're told. They were not questioning the narrative, right? An example of that type of behavior in human psychology, and it's not, I don't even think it's because of lack of intelligence. I just think it's because that most people just prefer to follow. Less responsibility for your actions. I mean, hey, most soldiers who from Nazi Germany were not executed, unlike the leaders. It's like the leaders, they're the ones who are going to take responsibility. Why? Because they were leading the packs. Okay, the packs themselves, the sheep were back to the cages or whatever it's called, behind the fence.
It is, right? Even Khomeini in Iran, the pattern is that they front as these sort of humanitarians who care about oppressed people, and then they find an enemy, and the enemy is always the Western world. It's always Israel, it's always the United States, it's always the Jews, and they use this scapegoat, and by putting everyone's focus on this scapegoat, look how bad the Jews are. The Jews killed JFK, the Jews did this, the Jews did this, and then they give this these conspiracies this legitimacy, and then people start to look at them as the saviors of the oppressed and the truth bearers and all of this stuff, and then suddenly you find yourself in the hands of communists and jihadists, and you have no idea how you got there, but you got there because of that line of anti-Semitism that they dangled in your face, right? So the thing about anti-Semitism, yes, it's racism, it's bad, it's all of that stuff, but it's more than that. It's like a deadly ideology that destroys society because people are so simple-minded that they just go for it.
I wonder, is it a spiritual thing, or it's just how gullible people are, and once they spread something, it becomes viral? Because I often wonder, is it a spiritual thing? It's biblical.
I think it's laziness. By the way, being spiritual is the same exact concept. Like having blind faith in God is the same exact concept, except that it's used for good, for the most part, right? Until it's not used for good, then you get not so good consequences. But it's the same exact concept. It's just human nature.
Biblically prophesied that some of these things would happen and that the people of Israel would be scattered around and then they would be brought back to the homeland. And these things were prophesied. In the hatred of Jews, I think that may have been prophesied as well. I don't know specifically where it's at. But do you address that in the book? Because I don't understand what it is, because I do think people really believe what they're saying. I have talked to people who are anti-Semitic and I don't think they know it. I think they're genuinely feeling a certain way about Jewish people, and they're like, but then they don't realize they're conflating Jews, right? Because you have religious Jews and you have secular Jews.
No, it's again, they're on the real way to make people anti-Semitic or racist or anything is to only expose them, or very disproportionately to expose them to one type of narrative. If you're a regular person who is barely on online, and like you just go on Twitter like once every blue moon, right? And you work around, not around Jews, let's say, right? And everybody's just saying how evil Israel is. And every time you go on X, you just see feeds of like fucking anti-Israel shit. You're gonna get radicalized without realizing you're radicalized. Now, some people just don't have the energy to be radicalized. I think I'm one of them. Like, it just can't really radicalize me. I'm kind of like, shit happens kind of thing. But some people would. Not to say that he'll go and like fucking march in the streets, but like his belief system would be like, yeah, okay, looks like Jews are evil.
And they just lump every Jew into the same realm. And it's weird to me. What were you going to say?
So yeah, it's an ethno-religion. So it's people are Jewish by ethnicity, as in, you know, they do a DNA test and it'll say like 99% Ashkenazi Jew, but it's also a religion. So yeah, there's it can be across the spectrum. What I was going to say is the way that I've discussed this in my book, less from a spiritual perspective, more from a sort of philosophical perspective. There's a man named Rene Girard who I think offers a good perspective on the whole thing with anti-Semitism. So what he describes by looking at each iteration in history, he comes up with this theory called mimetic rivalry. So what mimetic rivalry is that in every society, there are, let's say, two factions, or could be more, that are competing against each other. So let's say in the US, there's the left and the right, or even on a more global scale, the East and the West, right? And then so what happens is that this rivalry and this tension just increases more and more and more and more over time. And then by the time it's reached a boiling point, the only resolution is violence towards the other side. But both sides understand that this would bring down the destruction of society. So what they sort of inherently or intuitively decide is that they need to project all of that anger and violence onto a scapegoat, so that both sides can become united and sort of dissipate that anger by projecting it all onto the scapegoat and then killing the scapegoat. So that is a pattern that has emerged over throughout history, right? And because Jews have always been the convenient scapegoat because they never had a land to protect themselves. And so what's really interesting now is the way that we're seeing this actually play out so well, where we see now the extreme left and the extreme right, who have been at each other's throats for God knows how many years.
It's kind of funny, but like, she's talking about this as the Jews. I said this, I don't remember. This is like years ago. We're talking about like, just like some type of conflict with my friends, and they're like, how do you think like this conflict needs to be resolved? I was like, there's two ways. One side destroys the other, or aliens. If aliens come, the world will unite. All of like aliens come and like want to destroy the world will not. Like you need a target for your offensive. You know? It's like you need a problem bigger than the problem you're facing. Right? So it's kind of funny that like there is like, well, I mean, I think like it's logical that there is the like mimetic theory exists. Obviously, I think it's a logical thing, but it is kind of funny when like to put my random fucking thoughts of like a night where we're like just chilling, having a beer, and like maybe sitting in the sauna talking nonsense. It's really interesting and funny to see that what I was talking about is an actual like mimetic theory.
West now come together and say we both hate the Jews and we both hate Zionists because they're relieving that tension that would have otherwise resulted in violence. And then you're seeing it even at a global scale because the West and the East have forever been at war. But now the East, the jihadists, and the leftists in the West are now uniting and saying we also both hate the Jews. And so this is just a collective tension release of all of these rivalries scapegoated onto the Jews.
It makes so much sense the way you said it too, because it makes sense biblically, because that's what the scapegoat is all about. You put the sins on, put everybody's sins onto the scapegoat, and then you obviously run it out of the city. Sometimes they sacrifice the scapegoat, and that's what the term came from, and it makes sense. And I just wish that it wasn't that case, because I've been to Israel. I'm sure you've probably been to Israel before, and I just it's very simple. The Israeli people are just like any other people in the world. They have good people, they have bad people. Generically speaking, if you go to Israel, it's a safe place, it's a welcoming place, it's a fun place, it's a place with a rich amount of history. And to be honest, it is very accepting of Islam, and it's accepting of Palestinians, because when I was in Jerusalem, it was literally 50-50. I mean, Palestinians and Israelis are walking around with each other in Jerusalem. When I went to Tiberias, when I went to not in the Dead Sea, because that's one of the places where Jews and Palestinians don't converse, like they don't go that way. But it was a lot of other places where it seemed to be very accepting and peaceful. And I don't know why people can't just stick with that. Even if the government does something poor or does something, untoward, that's the same thing that America does. We do stuff we weren't supposed to do as a government. You don't say, I hate America. You go like, no, I love Americans.
Well, they do say that.
Yeah, they do. They definitely do. And I think some of the people, and to be honest, I think some of the people in America that claim to be patriots are starting to turn on their own country.
Exactly. And it's the craziest thing that the people that say America first are now the ones that are blaming America for everything. And
Yo!
So, this is what I always talk about, right? I always talk about ideological subversion. And it's the same master plan that came from the Soviet Union that is now being replicated by the
That's the Dave Smith reference right there. People who say America first, actually, a lot of them don't even like America. And again, the war in Iraq, by the way, and more correctly, Iran. Okay, the war in Iran, preventing Iran from getting nukes, is actually an America first stance. Okay, it is in the benefit of America if Iran does not have nukes. I just don't want the war in Iran. Then you're not America first, motherfucker. Like, you're closer to hating America than you are America first. If you believe that America should not do anything to stop Iran from getting nukes. And by anything, I mean do whatever is necessary. Okay? Just trying to talk to them, giving them 2 months, and like with no response, like, hey, you guys, you have 2 months, let's talk about a nuclear deal. They're like, oh yeah, sure. And they just want to delay it until the next president comes, who's not going to be as tough as Trump on them. Right? Just kick the can down the road. No, that's not America first. Kicking the can down the road is not America first. You're emboldening and you're empowering your enemies. That is not America first. Fucking dimwits.
Jihadists. The plan was always to convince Westerners to hate themselves so much that they would tear down their own society and create a power vacuum for them to step in. Yeah. And it's so unbelievable because the whole ideological subversion campaign from the Soviets was literally decades and decades of flooding us with all of this misinformation and anti-Westernism, which they would call, this is anti-imperialism, anti-capitalism. Meanwhile, they were the biggest imperialists in the world. It was all just a grift, right? And the Islamic Republic, the jihadists are doing the same campaign where they're trying to convince, through subversion, they're trying to convince the Western world to hate themselves. And so when people come out and they're like, the West is the source of all evil, the US is the source of all evil, it's like, have you ever left the US to know how much evil there is out there? You want to talk? The US is one of the most.
You're literally like, you are in such a safe haven. If you live in the US, you don't even fucking understand it. And I didn't even travel the world. I just know how shitty the world is because I understand, or at least I can see how evil humans can be. I accept the evil that can be in a human. And I accept the fact that some of this evil can gain enough power to rule over a population. And if an evil can rule over a population, that population would be in utter, forget this array. It would be hell to live in some places in the world because their rulers or their leaders or whatever are just fucking evil.
The best places in the world for liberation, for freedom, for free speech, for freedom of religion, you people wouldn't last a single day in Afghanistan or Iran. And the way that they talk about the Western world is so unbelievably out of touch. It's just, and they don't see that the way that they're talking about it is actually going to bring, it's going to bring harm over time because you're collapsing our values. You're collapsing the values of the liberal democracies that we have by supporting people who don't like free speech, who don't like freedom of religion, who don't like any of these things.
I really wish that.
And it's funny that she says it because, in my opinion, the downfall of the West will be the West's doing. Because it's like, I believe in freedom of speech, right? I think freedom of speech is fantastic. However, I also believe that freedom of speech can bring about the downfall of your freedom of speech. Okay? So the idea behind freedom of speech is essentially that it's like, you're allowed to say what you want to say, right? Like, you can say whatever you want as long as you're not inciting violence, and I can disprove it with my speech. The problem is, some people are more convincing than others. And especially when you have like stuff like, the internet, where people can be emboldened by other assholes who think the same as you, or like, are as shitty of people are as you are, right? Before, you would have like, let's say you live in a town, 10,000 people, you have maybe like 10 retards. Okay, it's gonna be very hard for these 10 retards to gather together and also spread their message. It's like very unlikely. But now you go on the internet, okay? You go on X. You live in the US. You have an opinion that is very bad for the US. It's just a wrong opinion. You can have that opinion, but it is a wrong opinion. Okay, you can be wrong. Okay, now you have some other retards in the US at random places in the US who are like, oh, this is right. And then you have also like the assholes who actually, that is their reality, who live in third world countries or whatever, who are going to agree with you because they also hate the US or whatever, right? And they're going to agree with you, and they're going to probably, and suddenly you have like 10,000, 100,000, a million views on your thing, and majority of them are not even from the US. But it's a popular opinion now. Because guess what? Majority of the world are not pro-US. Duh.
We can fix this to some degree, because I do see your point. I mean, the infighting is here. These leftist lunatics that are on campus, they hate Jews, they hate America. And then it's sad because some of the people on the conservative side are beginning to turn on America over Israel. And they begin to, say negative things about Donald Trump and that he's bad because he's supporting Israel to a certain degree. And I'm afraid that those two factions could come together a lot closer than they should. We are not the same. Gazans, a lot of them may be good people, but Hamas is an evil terrorist organization, and we know their tactics. We know how they fight dirty. They literally still have people that are kidnapped at this point. They still have people in their country kidnapped, and we know that they hide under buildings and they put their citizens out there. And we know that a lot of those citizens potentially would die for the cause, right? They would say, "I'm a martyr for my faith, and I'll stand in this building, or I'll stay behind when the evacuation notice is had." Because
and when you say stuff like this, people would call you like an Islamophobe or whatever. And again, does he mean that it's majority of them? Does it mean that it's a lot of them? No, but you don't need majority or a lot of them. You just need a few, and there will be a few. There will always be a few extremists. Okay? Maybe they're not extreme enough to join Hamas, but they're extreme enough to believe in a cause. There could also be people who believe in the cause, but also are desperate enough because they have nothing left to live for. Right? If you're, let's say, a woman, your husband died in some bombing, your children died in some bombing, you know what? Fuck it. Kill me too, and I'm going to make you look bad for doing it. What, you think those people don't exist? You think people who are like spiteful enough to die to make you look bad don't exist? Really? Especially people who lost everything? Really? They don't exist? Do you really give that much credit to human beings? I give like no credit to human beings. I expect the worst. And even that sometimes goes under my radar. Under my radar. Over my radar? Under my radar? I don't know. Radar doesn't detect it, okay?
Because this is going to further help us in the long run and help the faith in the long run. They will die for their faith.
Yeah.
Suicide bomb. I mean, you name it. And Iranians, not Iranians, but I say the regime in Iran will do the same thing. And I don't know why people are getting tricked by this.
I think, and this is exactly the point when you're talking about people being tricked by this, because you clearly you can see, right? Clearly you can see this, but there's also a narrative that has been constructed, and this is why I just keep talking about the same thing. There's a narrative that has been constructed to frame everything opposite to how it is. So when it comes to Hamas's ideology and its objectives, it clearly states that its objective is to create an Islamic caliphate across the entire Middle East. It's not just about destroying Israel, it's about destroying every sovereign nation's borders so that it can, impose its Islamist rule.
Yeah. There's gonna be peace when everything is Islam. Yeah. And for some reason, we have enough retards in the West that buy into it.